Hello everyone, so this is a walkthrough video for PageSigner. PageSigner is based on TLS Notary and it's a Firefox add-on that allows you to provide cryptographic proof that you visited a specific web page, like a screenshot, but it's actual proof rather than something that can be faked. So the purpose of this video is just to walk you through the steps of actually doing it. What can you do with it? How does it work? So obviously you need to install it first, so click this Get Started button here. You'll be getting an XPI file, which is an installer file, so save that. Then open that wherever it is on the disk. I've actually got a second copy here, so I'll just delete the second one. And what you do with that file is you simply drag it into Firefox, into the Firefox screen, and then you'll get a message saying, do you want to install this? So I do, so I click yes. So you'll see a message saying installed successfully, and you'll see this button here. This button opens a menu for entries. The last one is just an about page, so that's not very interesting. So the important bits are here: notarize, import, and manage. Notarize is the business end of actually what we're trying to do. We're going to try and get a signature from the PageSigner server saying yes, this is verified as being a correct, approved page, if I can put it like that. Before we go ahead and do it, I must mention the most important basic point. Although you are connecting to a server, you are not sending any data whatsoever to that server in terms of what's actually on the page. The only thing you're sending literally is the public key of the server, which, by the way, a public key of a server is easily found by just going to that server and looking at its certificate. That's the only information the server receives. However, through some kind of crypto magic, namely TLS Notary, you can still actually get proof that you visited that web page. That's the basic idea. There is a lot more to say. For example, the fact that the server does not have to be trusted because it's based on a technology called Amazon AWS Oracle. I am not going to go into any more detail now about how that works because I want to focus on what you have to do. So how does it work? Let's make the obvious observation here. If you go to a website like this, reddit.com, which is not HTTPS, or at least I haven't chosen the HTTPS option for Reddit here, and you try to notarize a page like that, you'll just get an error message. You cannot do this unless the page is HTTPS and unless your browser actually trusts it as HTTPS. So if I just go to another random page here, I'm just going to click one of the various possible pages on GitHub, just maybe that one, I don't know. I should be able to notarize this page. Actually no, because this one was already loaded in the browser before the extension was installed. So it's a fiddly little point, but it'll only come up in cases where you've already visited that page. So I'll just do this one because I'm just choosing a page I haven't been to before. And now you see there's a spinner here. Now what this spinner means is it's working. It's doing some interaction with the server, and very quickly, typically 2 to 5 seconds, that was actually slightly slower than normal, you'll get a page like this. Now notice what's happened here is I was looking at this page, but a new tab opened. Now it looks different, but it's actually the same page, because the difference is that you'll see here, and if you know anything about the web you'll understand this, the images and styling are not loaded. All you're getting here is pure HTML. Okay, so it's actually the same content, which you can probably see if you've looked at the page. PageSigner oracles here, PageSigner oracles, but without any of the styling and without any of the images. Now, because of that aspect, the non-loading of images and so on, it often looks a bit funky. It sometimes looks really weird, or it might just kind of, there'll be a blank page almost, but that doesn't necessarily mean it didn't work. What you need to do, or what you can do, is click this button up here, which opens the pure text version of the HTML and also includes the HTTP headers that were delivered. So this is literally the entire response that was sent from the server. Now of course it was an HTTPS page, so this response was sent encrypted and it came to your browser encrypted, but this is the decrypted version. And in certain cases, you might need to pay attention to the headers. For example, as here, if there is a cookie sent by the server, like a session cookie, the important point there is that you don't want anyone to see that cookie until and unless you've logged out, because it's a session cookie. But that almost certainly won't be a problem, except in some special cases, because you won't be sending this file to anyone immediately, like within a minute or two. You'll be logging out first. But just to be aware of that point. So another thing I didn't mention is do pay attention to the notification bar here. It does say PageSigner successfully verified that the web page was received from github.com. So to give you like the 1,000-foot view, it is checking the Firefox extension is checking that the certificate is correct, and it is correct for github.com, and it's checking that the contents, namely the HTML, are exactly what was claimed. Alright, so that's what you actually do to notarize a page. Once you've notarized one or more pages, what you might want to do then is to go to Manage Files here. And what Manage Files does is it gives you a quick view of all the pages that you currently have stored inside the Firefox extension. These are just locally on your disk in your Firefox profile. If you want to go digging around, you can find them as actual files. But the value of this table is it gives you a quick summary of the status of all the different notarized pages you have. So the one that we just did, it's maybe not immediately obvious because they're all organized by name, they're sorted by name, is this one here. And you can see here the date 27/04/2015 is actually today, and the time, and it tells you the server name from which the page was retrieved, github.com. And of course, also very important are these three rows on the right. Minor imported is just a way of saying, is this a file, is this an HTML page which I did a notarization for on this machine inside this extension, or is it something I received from someone else, or anyway was delivered into the extension from an external file. So this one was imported, for example. And here these green check marks are basically telling you that the extension can verify that the notarization was successful and the signature on the file is correct. So you can believe that this indeed, whoever has this file can believe that this file is genuine, this HTML file is genuine. Here's the name of the server. Now TLS Notary Group 1 is what you want to be using. That's the server set up using Amazon AWS Oracle technology. So this is the main server that we have now, TLS Notary Group 1. This obviously self-explanatory is a test server. But in future there might be other servers also. Now for any of these ones that you historically have either imported or have notarized yourself, you can always double check by viewing the file like that, or you can view it in HTML form. In other words, parsed as HTML in the browser, whichever view is more useful for you. And I suppose I should also mention that when you've got this kind of very difficult to read text file with all the HTML, it doesn't mean it's useless to read, because you can always use the find feature. Like for example, I can find my own username here. There it is. My username is mentioned a couple of times, or I might be searching for something a bit more meaningful. Username is not very meaningful in this context, but it could be some private data like my address or something else. So you can review the file. Now the first thing you might want to do if you've just done a notarization is change the name, because the name here is just given as the default, just the server name. That doesn't tell you anything. But actually the page I was looking at was the Stargazers page, so I could just rename this to Stargazers, but then I might just add GitHub as well as part of the name. And then it will reload on the page. Actually, there's some kind of bug there that for some reason it doesn't reload immediately, but in any case, if any reason you need to, you can always refresh the page just to get an up-to-date version. So here's an up-to-date version. We see the file's been renamed to stargazers_GitHub, and then having notarized the file and you now have it stored within the extension, you might want to then, or you will want to then give it to someone else, because that's the whole point of this. There's no point you just looking at your own notarizations. You already know that's real. But to prove to someone else it's real, you're going to have to give it to them. And the way you do that is you choose export. And in export, what you do is you choose a directory, and you you basically are going to save the file in the format PGSG. This is a binary format. It's just a file containing all the cryptographic data that allows someone else to verify the exact same HTML as you're seeing. So that file extension PGSG is something you should leave. You shouldn't change that because then it won't import. But obviously you can change the name however you like. You save the file, and then having saved it, of course, you can then send it to someone else. You can email it or whatever, but one word of caution is if the file contains data that is sensitive in some way and it's very important to you that nobody else sees it, then make sure you send it over some kind of secure channel, whether it be encrypted email, whether it be, I don't know, password protected zip file, whatever's appropriate. But just be aware that the contents of the file, although they do not contain the HTML directly, the HTML is encrypted and it can be decrypted by a third party if somebody gets a hold of it. So that's why I'm making that warning statement there. So okay, let's say you've sent that file, that PGSG file, to someone else. So now let's pretend you are the someone else. What would you do in order to import the file and check that the contents are correct? So first of all, I'm going to delete that version because I've already saved it somewhere else. So I'm not worried about deleting it. And I'm going to pretend I'm the other person and I'm going to import the file. So that's why we have this entry on the menu, import. So when you click import, you're going to go to whatever the location is that you've saved it, and as before you're going to open the PGSG file, make sure it's the correct extension. And when you've imported it, the experience of that person is the same. It's pretty much exactly the same as the experience of the original notarizer, in that well, except you don't obviously connect to the server, but the page loads in HTML form, and you get the notarization, the notification at the top saying yes, it's successfully verified. It tells you the server name. Now that was again checked on the other person's machine. Again, the certificate will be checked to make sure it came from the right server, and you'll be able to look at the contents and make an evaluation as to whether the information on the page is what you were expecting. And again, if you want to, you'll be able to look at that, the raw form of the file. Okay, so last thing to mention perhaps, if I just refresh here, it's going to bring that in again. You'll see it brings it in. So again, imagine you're the other person receiving it. This person could be called the auditor. I say, okay, yeah, the contents of the file are right. It's valid. I see a green check here. I can see the server it was notarized against, the server that signed it. By the way, if the validation fails for any reason, you're going to see a big red cross here instead of a green check, and there'll be some error message. So obviously in that case, you'd say, no, I don't accept that. Now this person again is going to have just the default username, the default file name here. They can also change it to whatever they like, whatever it was. What was it? Oh, like that. It doesn't matter. You make your own decision about what to call it, and then it appears there. So that's the basic structure of the process. Before I finish, I want to perhaps give you a couple of examples. So, because at the moment I've just shown you some perhaps rather abstract idea of what this application does, I haven't actually explained at all how it works, but that's for you to research further by looking at the TLS Notary website. You can read the white paper on TLS Notary itself. You can read the brief descriptions of how PageSigner works, and there's lots of other things to investigate. But I do want to finish by showing you a couple of examples of what you can do with it. So here I've got one called Dan Smith PM Reddit. So if I view that file, you'll see in here a PM, a private message on Reddit. So obviously this is a silly private message. This is doesn't mean anything, but you could imagine that if that information were important in some way, there's a whole kind of list of scenarios you could imagine when you might want to prove to a third party, or perhaps to the entire world, that you received a specific private message from another user. Of course, Reddit themselves could verify that if they needed to, but they wouldn't necessarily want to release it to other people, to third parties or fourth parties or whatever they're called. I think that example is really interesting. I'm not sure about the full implications of doing that. Suppose you were able to prove private messages. There are many possible scenarios where that might be either interesting or who knows. Another example, maybe a bit more concretely obvious in its use case, is suppose you have a financial transaction record. Now here I've chosen local bitcoins, and what I've done here is I have notarized a page that shows all of my transaction record for the month of February 2014. It's not a particularly interesting transaction record, bunch of SMS fees, and just like one, actually I think it's just one trade, although it looks a bit confusing. So the use case here is more obvious, especially if it wasn't bitcoins. Actually, bitcoins might not be the best sort of example of transactions in bitcoins, but imagine it's transactions in fiat currency, US dollars, let's say. If you could show to a third party, perhaps a trusted third party, a record of a transaction that occurred, that might help to solve cases of dispute in trade. Actually, that is the use case that has already been seen with TLS Notary, where a certain trading website can check with its users whether a certain transaction took place or whether a certain account is owned by a certain party. So, I mean, this particular page verifies the username as well as the transactions, but it could be one or the other, or it could be other information like address. So that's a kind of interesting use case, I think, and it even extends out into thinking about general auditing. Like you could have people who want to verify or want to prove that certain statements were made by an exchange website or a trading website, and that could be done, even in a large scale. We've discussed various complicated schemes of auditing in which this might help. So that's also very interesting. There are other use cases, but I think I'll leave it there. I mean, I have an example of an address here as well. So I hope that gives you an idea, a flavor of how this system might be used. And also I hope the first part of the video showed you how easy it is to actually do it. If you want to find out more, you can go to the TLS Notary website, which also hosts this page on PageSigner. And there's some brief description there. If you're into the code, then the main TLS Notary repository, the main TLS Notary group area, has currently 3 repositories: one for TLS Notary itself, one for PageSigner, and one for the Oracle that I mentioned already. And please feel free to get in touch and ask if you have any questions. Thank you.